The removal of roles and relationships in the music composition practice. And I will say specifically the composer or performer versus the audience. There was a stripping down of hierarchy when I was a student, also a performer. So I was an active performer, whether it was using my voice or my violin. But there was kind of this antipathy toward this structure, the composer producing a piece of music or a performer playing a piece of music, and then the audience receiving that music. No, 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 no. In places like Seattle, and this was in Milwaukee too, it's like, no, no, no. The audience is equal to the composer and the performer, not beneath them. It's like, first of all, you don't look down on your audience if you have that philosophy. No, the audience is to receive your performance. The audience is to receive your musical composition. I just had a great successful gig as a violinist yesterday, and there's just nothing more rewarding than working so hard on your instrument all those years and then people just being so blessed by it. I don't look down on my audience. I was on a stage and physically my head was higher, but I was just so well received, and I was so gracious for them receiving me. There's no edge. There's no harsh relationships between the audience and the performer, or the audience and the composer. And so there was this real disdain for this it was like this presupposed idea, like, oh, the composer is superior because they did all the work. It's like, well, the composer did do all the work. The performer practiced it, and the audience is going to receive it as a benefit, or however they receive it. That's just the way it is. And in Seattle especially, but again, I saw this in Milwaukee as well, it was the stripping away from that. It's like, oh, no, it's an equal tier, okay? So composer and audience, they are equal. No one said they weren't equal, like in society and in culture, but even in the music space, they are equal. You cannot have the composer be the superior. And you can't have the audience mindlessly consuming. It's like, okay, if I go to a symphony and I spend some money on a ticket, I don't mind consuming. I don't mind receiving. That's just my role as an audience member. That's my role as a listener. And my role as a composer is actually not to, look down upon people and all that. No, it's a service to produce art for them to receive. So anyway, what does this look like? Put it into practice, put into composition practice. The stripping down of these roles and relationships, this established hierarchy, if you want to call it, where the composer produces a piece of music and serves the audience. Well, you had things like the Happenings concert, or the Fluxus movement, as it started in the 1960s, I think in New York, where the audience starts participating in the performance. Now, this is kind of cool. Every once in a while, maybe you've got a set of instructions and you got to make certain noises, you've got to do certain movements, or you've got to, be part of this happening where the composer maybe just wrote out several lists of cards and say, do this, do that, and is that not superior? I don't know. You're going to do this, you're going to do that, or maybe you could do this and that. Maybe you could do A, B, C, all three of them, or none of them at all. That kind of indeterministic idea. And then the audience would go and do these things or not do these things. And every happening, every concert in that way would be different every night, however many showings of this happened. Now, it's a really cool idea. And it's fun, actually, to experience this. I had a couple of experiences. I will say, though, I paid $20 for a black tie event. That was that. And I paid $20 as a graduate student, making $700 a month. I want to be served and entertained, dang it. So I was a little ticked off with that. But the happenings are fine. But what does this do, or what can this do in composition over time? And what can this do to a composer in the composition practice over time? I will say, people can fight me on this, but I will say that you get lazy over time because it's like, oh, well, I could just compose a list of instructions for people to do. Or maybe I'll just do graphic scores where, a set of ink blots are meant to be, loud and abrasive. And these little beautiful tracing lines are supposed to be light and feathery and stuff like that. And I know graphic scores are a thing. They probably still are a thing. They were a thing probably since the 1970s. Actually, I think Ligeti, he definitely was at the forefront. Oh, was he? I can't remember. I can't remember my contemporary music history right now. Graphic scores, though, I mean, unless you're a visual artist and you put so much time and attention in the art of the graphic score, unless you actually pay very close amount of time and attention in a graphic scores by composers, just the average composer, especially a student composer, is really haphazard. It's so lazy, especially if you're not a visual artist and you can't draw. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna trace these squares, and then these squares are gonna mean something, and sometimes the result is haphazard. So it really does render it. The idea of the happening is kind of cool. The philosophy of stripping the composer, you got to bring him down from the stage, or the performer, whether it's the composer or performer or both. It's like they can't be on the stage; they need to be in the audience, like philosophically and physically. It's about creating everyone equal, but they're not really equal in their roles anyway. It's a different function as a composer and as a performer. It's a different function as an audience. I'm both composer and performer, and I have been a listener. You just do different things in different ways, and that's fine. But all this to say is that it's just it can really render a haphazard performance. I remember Pauline Oliveros, her visiting Seattle at the time. She's passed now, but she was pretty iconic in the contemporary music world. And I didn't meet her, but I got to see her talk, and I was in Seattle Town Hall. This is bringing back memories. I was in the Seattle Town Hall, and she was saying, okay, so she's on the stage, and she's saying, do this, now do this, and based on this diagram, do this and do this, and it was like make infantile sounds, or make children's sounds and stuff like that. So you got all these adults like scattered all around Town Hall in Seattle, pretty resonant hall too, and you got these 50-year-old men and 60-year-old men and women going, and I'm like, I was so sick of it. I was like, this is pointless. This is stupid. This is a resonant hall, right? I took a deep breath, and I just screamed the most blood-curdling scream. I'm just like, and I think people were unnerved by that, and I didn't do it to unnerve them, but it was my gut reaction as a student at the time, because I was kind of in this philosophy myself. It's like, I don't want pointless moments, I just where people are kind of haphazard. So the audience members were not, I shouldn't say haphazard, they were doing it half-heartedly. And then the composer say, okay, do this in a half-hearted way. No disrespect to Pauline Oliveros, but that's what the Fluxus movement, that's what the happening movements are about. Where it's where like, okay, composer is not in complete control. Again, that's not entirely on its own a bad thing, but you still, I would say it renders many composers, especially student composers, the inability to compose better because of that. It's like, well, it happens anyway, so it doesn't matter. So that's an example of impotent art. That's what the removal of relationships do, is causing half-hearted, impotent art over time. So, do something like that as a composer, but also understand that you've got to be competent in your art all the same. You have to be very specific. Things like with Yoko Ono, it's like she was more general, and I did stuff to the best of my ability under her instruction. I didn't meet her in person, but I had a list of Yoko Ono instructions, and it's like, okay, well, I'll do the best I can.